I Hate the News is a weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's May 19th, 2026. Maryland GOP delegates Mark Fisher and Brian Chisholm on a podcast called Chinese American and Democratic State Delegate Chow Wu, a Chinese spy, based on a 2025 bill that Chow had introduced in the State General Assembly to require transparency from AI training models. The Prescription Drug Affordability Board in Maryland set upper payment limits on the purchase of the weight loss drug Ozempic by state and local government entities. A year from now, the board can expand the cost control measure to all, including commercial insurance plans. Montgomery County Council took straw votes last week on next year's capital and operating budgets, which at this point leaves MCPS short from their budget ask, but also points to bigger problems next year because the larger shortfall was met with a shift of money from the capital to the operating budget. That money will not be available next year. The council casts the final votes this week, May 21st. The Maryland Public Service Commission steps back from its plan to prevent excessive investment in gas delivery infrastructure by utility companies that is expected to leave stranded assets as the state of Maryland tries to reduce fossil fuel use to net zero by 2045. A former Montgomery County employee in the Office of Human Resources alleges discrimination and denial of disability accommodations in that office. And more. Stay with us.
What's the matter? You seem so surprised, glancing in the morning paper tonight. Seems that the French can capitalize, no the execution of a spy. During General didn't die. Watch his family cry. Watch his family cry.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The two songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp.
The Czechs have bargained for a nuclear call. Nairobi got hungry, so they started a war. Famous senators faced the law. Babylon discovered she was a hoe with a halo.
Calvert County Republican delegate Mark Fisher hosts a podcast called The Dumbest Bill in America. Recently, he and Anne Arundel Republican delegate Brian Chisholm attacked fellow delegate Democrat Chow Wu from Howard and Montgomery counties over a 2025 bill that asked AI platforms to disclose their training models. Here is an excerpt from the podcast.
Welcome back to the dumbest bill in America. We have, of course, with us Delegate Brian Chisholm. Welcome back, Brian.
Good to be here.
Get this podcast, listeners. We're calling this podcast the Chicom of the Year Award because we believe that we have a communist Chicom among us. Well, and let me tell you why. First of all, the bill is House Bill 823 from 2025, and it was introduced by Delegate Wu, spelled W-U. And the bill basically says that if you're going to engage in AI training, artificial intelligence training, that you have to disclose your training models every time and your training data every time you change it. Well, that would be, of course, a trade secret, wouldn't it? Of course it would be. So why would anyone do this? Well, we're going to show you a clip of Delegate Wu from that hearing giving his testimony. No specific information really here that you're going to watch other than let's see what you think. Here it is.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and Madam current Chair Panorama, and a member of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Chao presenting HB 823, the Generative Artificial Intelligence Data Transparency Bill, and I respectfully request your favorable report. Over the past decades, generative artificial intelligence has experienced exponential growth, with its market size increased by 690%.
Okay, Brian, what do you think?
Well, there's a saying in China that only catch fish in muddy water. So, and what that means, and this is true, Mark, in China, they do not want their businesses are actually encouraged to lie to American investors. That's just fact.
But Delegate Wu is a member of the House of Delegates from Howard County.
Exactly. So look, China knows they can't take us down with tanks and bullets and all that. They have to kind of backdoor. So they send in spies, people like Chao Wu, and try to gain intelligence, correct? That's the goal. The fight right now is who can get the intelligence faster. Why they sent us, and it says something about Maryland. Maybe we're like the JV team that they sent Chao Wu because he's not the greatest of spies. I mean, his trail, yeah, and I'm sure you're going to bring up the article. We know he was working for the CCP when he was in college. Right? You can't just reject the CCP at one time. It's not like, being in a gang and all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to be with you guys anymore. That's not the way where it works in China. Once you're a communist, you can't just reject it.
When that happened, I was like, wow, that's really weird, right? There's something not right here. And then I started doing some research.
Right.
And what did we find out, Brian? Well, an article in the Washington Examiner, podcast listeners, Democrat state representative headed CCP front group in college.
The bill did not pass. And whether it was a good bill or a bad bill may be a legitimate question. But to impugn a fellow delegate as a foreign spy based on an article in the Washington Examiner, well known for its right-wing bias, all is fair in politics and war, I guess. But surely we need something more than innuendo, ethnic association, and a thick Chinese accent to determine espionage. As utility bills rise in Maryland, state leaders in the General Assembly have sought to claw back some of the increases by excluding certain types of expenses, such as excessive executive compensation, from inclusion in how consumer rates are calculated. But now, the Maryland Public Service Commission has decided to continue to allow the cost of new gas service connections to be spread over the entire customer base of gas utilities, setting up future rate hikes. The story goes back to 2013 when the Maryland legislature passed the STRIDE law, which allowed gas companies to speed up infrastructure replacement and growth, and the ability to pass these costs to ratepayers. A key provision of the law allowed the cost of new gas connections to be paid by all existing natural gas users, thereby reducing the cost of adding new customers. Over the next decade, gas companies invested billions of dollars in new infrastructure while being able to charge customers for the expansion. In the early years, the impact was limited because natural gas commodity prices were low. But it quickly became clear that the new gas infrastructure would outlive the net zero emission deadline Maryland had set for itself. If the state succeeded in its net zero goals and customers moved away from fossil fuel use, gas companies would be left with pipes and pumping stations not being fully used, but still having to pay for them. These are called stranded assets. And we did an episode on this 2 years ago with David Lapp, Maryland's People's Counsel, the state's consumer advocate in front of the utilities. Under pressure from environmental groups, and the People's Council, last year, 2025, the Public Service Commission under then-Chair Fred Hoover decided that it would require gas companies to charge new customers the full cost of a new connection rather than allowing them to socialize the cost across ratepayers. But last week, the commission, under its new chair, former Rockville delegate Kumar Barve, decided to roll back the 2025 decision. Barve said that the commission needed more time to study the issue, unclear how long the study will take. Meanwhile, gas companies can now go back to spending more on infrastructure with the assurance that ratepayers will bear that cost. Montgomery County Council took another straw vote last week on next year's capital and operating budgets. In response to the straw vote from the week before, MCPS had created different levels of what the cuts meant, called tranches. In the first tranche, with $18 million cut, there were a bunch of central office cuts, but also the removal of practically all media assistants from all elementary school libraries. A total of 70 full-time positions. High schools would lose 30 library positions, 25 college and career counselors, 25 social workers, and 30 English language instruction assistants. The next tranche, at $36 million, which is where the county council ended up in its last straw vote, meant further cuts to 50 family engagement positions and 30 special education resource teacher positions. No more middle school lunch aides and another bunch of central office positions. Now, whether this will happen or not, we do not know. $36 million is just shy of 1% of MCPS's total operating budget of $3.8 billion. And the expectation is that it should not be a big deal. But consider that 90% of the school district's operating budget goes to salaries. That is $3.4 billion out of the $3.8 billion is just wages. Since there is only $400 million for everything else, including curriculum, instructional materials, and maintenance, cutting $36 million means cutting existing jobs, which were presumably created for particular purposes. And those holding those positions develop a strong interest and become vocal defenders of their own work. This is why cutting existing positions is among the hardest things in politics, and few do it rationally. Elon Musk's Doge efforts should be ample warning to those calling this process easy. And you can tell the pressure in the voices of county council members debating the issue last Friday. We begin with Councilmember Will Joando proposing to move $36 million from the capital budget to the operating budget.
I'd like to move that we remove $36 million in current revenue that the council had allocated to the CIP due to the income tax and ITOC decisions, and instead allocate that to the operating budget to fund 2 additional tranches for MCPS off the reconciliation list.
Council Vice President Marilyn Balcombe to the defense of the move.
An $8 billion budget is a complex puzzle to solve, and it's very important to remember that the $36 million that we're talking about would not even have been available if it weren't for the hard work of the GO Committee and Chair Kate Stewart. I want to thank her for her painstaking work that she and the committee did to find a more progressive tax solution with a reduction in income tax for our low wage workers and the elimination of the ITOC. The byproduct of that policy shift was a one-time $44 million pot of money for capital projects. It's also important to note that the vote for the new income tax structure was not unanimous, including those who today are eager to spend the money. The transfer of money from capital projects to operating budget is not as easy as it sounds. First, it takes money away from important capital projects, important MCPS capital projects, but it further exacerbates the structural deficit. And after weeks of discussions, I regret that this is the only viable option. Thank you.
Next, Council Member Don Lucky.
I cannot support the motion to transfer the money out of the CIP and into the operating budget. The vote on the ITOC and the progressive tax piece, which was inherently intertwined, was a close vote. And I did vote for that because I do believe in the progressivizing of the income tax. I think it is the right and responsible thing to do. While eliminating the ITAC was challenging and came with a lot of heartburn, it was necessary paired with that progressivization to make that happen and would have yielded the $44 million for us to use on capital projects. The fact that we are now taking $36 million of that away and at the same time sacrificing potentially just under $15 million in state aid for very necessary capital projects, many of which affect our schools, like HVAC, roof replacement, outdoor play space, is very disappointing. I think that there were trade-offs to be had, and I was okay with where we were, which is why I voted to support on the ITOP progressive income tax motion the other day. But it was with the understanding that one-time funds would be used for the one-time things, and that is not the motion that is before the body today, so I will not be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Kate Stewart.
I floated earlier this week the idea of a modest property tax increase to get us to where we need to be in the funding. I know that was a really tough ask this year, not just of my colleagues, but of members of the community. That idea did not move forward. And we need to get to a final budget. And we need to find the additional money for the schools. I will say that one of the hardest things for me in the last year has been talking to parents and many of you about the conditions in the schools and in your facilities, about the mold, the asbestos, and other things. I ask for your grace today because I will not be voting for this motion. I will vote for the tranches. I will vote for the budget. But I need you to understand, it is not because I am not with you. It is just that I can't take this vote to take this money out of infrastructure right now. And I just ask for your grace on that today. Thank you.
We have a motion on the table in a second. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and hold it. Gonna need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. The motion passes.
After further debate and more straw votes, Councilmember Don Lutke came back with this.
I was prepared to vote on a budget yesterday with many compromises, and that was far from perfect. It was a budget forged through weeks of open and transparent deliberations and through public votes on the dais. And then yesterday, literally as we were ready to vote, suddenly that transparent process was replaced by indecision, behind closed doors deal making, and major last minute changes that exacerbate our structural deficit. To provide a stark example of this, understand that the reductions in the capital budget you see here today that we talked about, and I want to thank staff for having those charts available, they were unknown to council members even this morning before we walked in here. That is not indicative of a serious deliberative process, and it is a disservice to our county. We are living in what will continue to persist as rough economic waters, and we must navigate them with caution and with purpose.
As emotional as the budget deliberations were last Friday, one thing caught my ear. Right before Councilmember Joando proposed moving $36 million from the capital to the operating budget, the council unanimously and without any debate whatsoever approved a water fee hike of 5% for WSSC for the next fiscal year 2027. For 2026, WSSC was allowed a rate and fee hike of 9.5%. and in 2025, 8.5%. Including the 2027 increase, WSSC has increased its rates in Montgomery and Prince George's counties by over 60% since 2020. Here is Council President Natalie Fanny Gonzalez leading the effort to pass the rate hike and to suspend the rules to allow the rate hike to be passed.
The first item on the agenda is one that is exciting for me. And it's the introduction and action on a resolution to approve the WSSC Water and System Development Charge. Is there a motion to suspend Rule 7D of a Rules of Procedure to allow for the introduction and action of this item?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Katz. Can I get a second? Second by Council Vice President Balcom. Those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passed unanimously. Now, is there a motion to approve WSSC Water System Development Charge? Moved by Council Member Evan Glass, second by Council Member Sidney Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passed unanimously.
WSSC says a typical customer with a family of 3 using 48 gallons of water per person daily would see a quarterly increase of $14.75 in their bill, or $4.92 per month. If you have more people at home, good luck with that. For our final story of this episode, we have a former employee of the Montgomery County Office of Human Resources.
Hello, my name is Christopher Van Foltz. Previously, I was the Disability Program Coordinator from September 2025 to January 2026 for Montgomery County government.
What does the Disability Program Coordinator do?
Reasonable accommodations was predominantly what my responsibilities were. Reasonable accommodations are anytime an individual has any type of health considerations, be it an injury, an illness, anything of that nature that requires us to make a modification to how they do work. Now, you must be able to do your essential functions, but how you do everything else around those essential functions, we can modify. So my job was to basically help them support those because we were inundated with reasonable accommodations.
But the reasonable standard within the ADA is about the employer being reasonably able to accommodate, right?
Yes.
You worked for the federal government for 16 years, after
Yes.
which you were removed as part of the DOJ process.
That's correct.
In 2025. What is it that you did in the federal government?
I ran the disability program in its entirety for the Secret Service. And then at HRSA, which is Health Resources and Services Administration, I was the Senior Equal Employment Specialist. That was the official job title. I was essentially the Disability Program Manager there as well. And I had a staff of 6 employees.
You are yourself a disabled Marine veteran.
That is correct.
What is your disability?
I have spinal cord injuries from a training accident in the Marine Corps. I have TBI and I have PTSD.
So TBI is traumatic brain injury and PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. What does it prevent you from doing? What is your accommodation?
I typically had ergonomic chairs because I have, again, a lot of orthopedic injuries. I was giving flexibility for scheduling. I could also frequently had opportunities to work from home. This was pre-COVID, obviously, but once we had the post-COVID era, I typically did a lot of work from home.
Now, the grievance that you filed with the Montgomery County government is essentially 2 parts. One is that there has been discrimination against you, and the other part is that the Office of Human Resources in Montgomery County is not following Americans with Disabilities Act provisions and so therefore out of compliance with law.
My supervisor, I think it was approximately 6 weeks into my employment, stated that there was an individual who made a request for a reasonable accommodation, and she doubted that his reasonable accommodation request was authentic because there was things about him that were shady. She wanted me to reach out to the VA location that he had worked at, because he had worked there previously, but he also was a patient there, and to inquire about his disability status.
Okay, so this is another county employee who is a disabled veteran called MG in your grievance. And you were making the determination whether this accommodation was reasonable.
Yes.
I'm sure there are cases of accommodation requests that are unreasonable. In your supervisor's position, why would such a verification measure action be wrong?
It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be if we had waited till we received a release of. There's forms that you fill out for called a release of medical information request. Mm-hmm. We did not do that.
The issue is that the process of requesting consent was not kept.
That's exactly the issue.
Why would you say that she discriminated against you on basis of your disability and then race?
By that time, there had already been few occasions she had made statements. Remember, this is only 6 weeks into my employment. I was only like in October. She'd already made statements about people with disabilities. She said that when you get these individuals, you got to really dig into anybody with a disability about if it's factual, because we know most of them are either lying or they're being lazy.
That's her general attitude, and it's a bad one to have for a manager of a disability program, no doubt. But was anything directed against you?
Well, up to this point, no. But it started really at this point with the individual MG. Because after I did this request she had, like I said, I had established I was fearful of people with of saying no. So what I did, instead of complying with her, I thought instead of rather saying no, I'd rather be seen as incompetent instead of non-compliant. So I purposely made a mistake on making that call to inquire on the validity of the medical information. Purposely, I did that incorrectly. She told me to, stop doing it, stop inquiring. And fortunately, I was wise enough to get this all on record. She was, my supervisor sent this information to me in a Teams chat, so I recorded all this. It was pretty easy to do so. But what happened after that, when I started getting some examples of this, is that there's more and more evidence of my supervisor asking for verification for individuals without having justification.
Were her actions racially oriented?
MG asked my supervisor why the results would be this way, because they had experience working in a
Were you there?
No, I was not.
So this is reported to you by MG?
Yes.
Was it race?
I'm seeing a pattern of people based on age, because my supervisor had stated, well, if we have older individuals who are getting phased out, that's fine. They're older, they're disabled, obviously they're not working hard. We need to get rid of them and phase them out. Plus, we can bring in new federal employees. We have so many looking for jobs, we can hire them. And if they don't work out, we just get rid of them. We got a probationary period to get rid of them, bring them in. This is when MG went and talked to my supervisor about how he did not feel like his accommodation was treated properly, because he said there was no interactive process. He said, how do you know my accommodation could or could not be granted? I never had an opportunity to work with my supervisor. At that time, MG, who is a person of color, as is my supervisor said to MG, why are you listening to Chris? And rubbed their skin and said, that white boy doesn't know what he's talking about.
But this is hearsay.
This is what MG directly reported to me.
So this continued for a while, and then you were let go on...
What happened in December, when I did all this information, realized all this was happening, I reached out to my second line and third line supervisors. And I asked them for a meeting. I said, I think there's some information you need to be aware about. They scheduled a meeting for me in middle of December. At the same time, I reached out to multiple offices within Montgomery County government. That included the human rights, the employee relations, EEO, you name it. Basically, anybody who had some role in protecting employee rights, I contacted every one of them. A day before my meeting was scheduled with my second and third line supervisors, it was suddenly canceled. Second day after. I received contacts from that point, starting with labor relations and then EEO unofficially, that they're like, we don't think we can take your case. The reasoning was, well, we don't think this case falls under our purview.
They didn't give you an official reason, and within your probationary period, which is where you were on, they don't even need to give you
exactly.
You did say when your supervisor asked you to verify MG's case, you deliberately made a call that would make you look incompetent.
Yes.
Do you think that call and that thereafter evidence of incompetence played into their decision to terminate you without giving reason, because they don't have to during the probationary period?
I don't think so, because one thing that I know that has been also established, and I know McGeo can probably establish this, is that I was one of probably a half dozen employees who are former federal employees who were hired by OHR, Office of Human Resources, who were feds, who were let go during their probationary period. Every one of those feds I've spoken to, because we've all been in touch, were high performers, had long histories of being high performers at our federal government during our federal government tenure.
You were terminated January 5th, 2026. Did you go on to other employment? What is your status now?
I'm a 100% disabled veteran. I'm doing fine right now, so I'm not looking for employment right now.
Christopher Van Foltz, thank you and good luck.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure.
McGeo, the County Government Employees Union, says that there are 14 cases like Chris Van Foltz's on reasonable accommodation denial. That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that comes out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The two songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
You will never learn